Aloha and welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson, where I have out-of-this-world conversations with extraordinary people. Today, I am so excited to have on Jennifer Jurkofsky, and we're going to bring her on in just a moment. But first, a couple of announcements. If you have not had the opportunity yet to grab my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you do so at mysticmanta.com or drlisajthompson.com. Also, in February 22nd, 23rd, online, I am teaching my Galactic Ascension Channel Certification Program. So that information's on my website. And my Galactic Retreat here on the Big Island of Hawaii is April 30th to May 4th. 5 deep dive days of connection with your galactic family. So more information, mysticmanta.com. And then if you are coming to Hawaii, specifically to the Big Island, Kona side, then come on one of my Big Island UFO tours where you will see the night sky in a whole new way using my advanced Generation 3 military night vision goggles. And more information for that is at bigislandufotours.com. We're going to bring Jennifer onto the stage. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to have our conversation. So first, let me read your bio. And then we'll get into it. So Jennifer Jurkofsky is a registered psychotherapist, certified Canadian Counsellor, psychotherapeutic energy healer, and intuitive life coach. She's the founder of My Holistic Self Counselling, Becoming the Passenger Consciousness, and Perpetual Wonderment Ministries. She's a speaker, author, and teacher, internationally recognized for her work in the field of mental health. Having started in the mental health field in 2000, Jennifer brings over 20 years of experience and spiritual journeying to her holistic practice. This experience gives Jennifer a unique understanding of the human psyche as it relates to vibrational energies, both internal and external, which she incorporates to support a fully holistic healing experience for her clients. This ability to combine her counseling and psychotherapy education with her spiritual understanding and intuitive insights is the foundation she works from to guide clients on their journey toward the true self. Okay, so that's a lot of psychotherapy, more than that. So so you and we met just recently because I was on your show with Tanis Coughlin, and Tanis just was a recent guest of mine on the show too. So we're just combining this beautiful tribe. So before we get into that kind of conversation, I would love for you to share how you grew up, spiritual, religious, something else, so we can understand how you got on the spiritual path journey and the work that you do.
Yeah, a little bit of all of it, actually. I say, many lives of this kind of routine of exploration. And so as a child, my family wasn't very religious. My dad would go to church, but my mom didn't do much spiritually. And I lived with my mom growing up, so we didn't do very much. Other than maybe playing Barbie dolls in the pews, right? When I was a kid.
Yeah.
But then there was a part of me, even at a young age, that felt like there was more. And I wanted to know what that more was. And so I started to explore. And I would explore, whatever I was introduced to. So I got introduced to a youth group, and I started going to youth group with friends, really deep dove into the Christian faith at that time, and ended up getting my family to start going to church because it was such a huge part of my life. All the way through to the point of going to a private Christian school for high school, and then a Christian university.
Wow.
Right. And so it was a big part of my life until near the end of my university time. We did dual degrees. So I got my bachelor's of social work, but then we also got a bachelor's degree of Bible, right, or biblical studies. And so my final kind of project was to write my own personal statement of faith, right? And it did not agree with that of the school. My doctrinal statement was different. And I remember almost failing that class and having to defend why my beliefs were different.
Mm.
And in that moment, I just said, okay, there's got to be something more, because it can't just be all of these things that we've been fed, right? And I started looking into all different kinds of faiths and religions. And my aunt, who I still am very close to, started opening my eyes to different things as well. And so even, as a child, she was trying to get me to see that what I had chosen as my path was not the only path. And so I really appreciated that even more so at the end of my university, because I realized that everything that she had been working with me on was indeed where I wanted to go, right? In terms of having a greater understanding. And so, like I said, I dove into the mysticism of so many different religious teachings and all, and found what truly resonated for me as a deeper spiritual truth that wasn't tied to one specific faith.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah.
So through that evolution, I came to understand that what we perceive to know is not at all what is reality. And I often find myself quoting the Tao, right? That, not knowing is true knowledge. Perceiving to know is a disease, right? And so really kind of holding that place of not knowing has changed everything in terms of my practice and who I am as a person and how I've been moving forward ever since.
Okay. Well, so you're, traditionally trained in psychotherapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when along that journey did you incorporate the spiritual stuff into that to have more of that holistic practice?
Yeah, I kind of did it backwards.
Okay.
I'm also ordained minister, so I have my spiritual counseling piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing counseling and coaching for years. And 20 years after my undergrad, I decided to go back for my graduate degree.
Okay.
And that is when I brought psychotherapy into it. And I knew right from the start that I didn't want to be traditional,
Mm-hmm.
the way that I did my therapy practice. And so instead of, starting a whole new psychotherapy practice, I actually just brought that into my spiritual practice.
Okay. I love that, because normally it is, with the guests I've had on who might be in this kind of field, it has been more the other way. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you are highly galactic. And I, one of the things that we really connected on the other day when we met was that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so when did you discover that you were actually more than just Jennifer, or that you had these roots, in other star systems?
I think on some level, part of me knew, in terms of just, like I said, growing up, I longed for something else.
Okay.
Right? Not
Yeah.
knowing necessarily what that was. And I don't think that as a child, I really understood the depths of what that meant. And then, I remember as a teenager being out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of friends, and we were staring up at the stars, and we could see the Milky Way so beautiful. It was amazing. And I remember looking up and going, yeah, there's something out there that feels like home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, still not knowing what that meant.
Yeah.
And over time, different things would come in, different energies would come in, and I would think, okay, this resonates on a really deep level for me, and I don't necessarily know why or how to place it. And then one night I had this beautiful dream of my life as a Lyran. And it was beautiful and devastating and life-changing, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is it. This is what I haven't had access to, right? And I started to write it down. And then bit by bit, more insight, more understanding, more connection to that energy continued to flow in. And I thought, okay, there's a coming home in this that just, it resonated to the core of my being. I'm like, this just feels right. And, it was interesting because I would talk to friends about it and all of that, and things would just come, right? Somebody would say something and I would respond with information that I don't have, right? Yeah. And, then later they'd come back and be like, oh, I read this thing online. And you know what you had said the other day? It was just like what this thing was that I was reading, but this was different or that was different. And I haven't read it, but I'm like, okay, cool. Right? There is this, piece that I feel, okay, my experience or what I'm being given is in line with somebody else's experience. And that's pretty cool. Right? And over time, it just became more and more of an actual memory than just something that was out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, we go through and I have the ability to tap into past lives and all of that. And I see them like movies, right? When they play through. And this particular life, it just kept coming through. And I just knew, okay, this is something that I deeply resonate with, and I can feel that experience paralleling itself to this life in many ways.
Well, I mean, at the quantum level, all timelines are existing simultaneously, right?
You're right. Yeah. And so being able to, it does have that feeling of walking in both, right? In different ways. And obviously my experience in this life is different than my experience was in that one. But a lot of the lessons from that one and a lot of the deep insights and even the pain and the healing from that pain are reminiscent of things in this lifetime.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we do bring forth things from other lifetimes, whether they're earthbound or something else that we're still playing out here so that it can be healed, or the lesson learned, the wisdom gained, all of that. And so being, so when people hear, okay, being a Lyran, there are a lot of different time periods within this Lyran experience, but yours, so you've written a beautiful book that's not yet out, but when it comes out, I mean, it really, you are such a brilliant writer, and the way that you're describing this. So this was a very specific time, a critical time in the galaxy and Lyran history. So do you want to just touch on what was going on?
Yeah. So I do talk a bit about Lyran history and the evolution of what it was to become Lyran in there. So the way that the book is set up is there's 3 sections to it. So the first section is really just a history. And it's the history around the wars, right? And what was going on during that time period. And then the second section of the book is the story. It's me telling my story in that lifetime. And, as it was coming, I'm, typing away, crying, right? And just holding space for the healing process, because this particular lifetime was when the many planets in Lyra were destroyed. Okay.
And when you, just for the audience's sake, so when you're talking about the wars, because, there's probably a lot of people that are, what wars? I don't know about this.
Right. So the Orion Wars, I'll say between Lyra and the Draconians, but really it was a massive battle with many different species involved on both sides.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And so it was a huge galactic war. I know some people, will say like the Great Galactic War.
Right. And I mean, as you say that, full goosebumps, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so continue. so part 2 is your story, and then part 3 is.
And then part 3 actually is an appendix in a lot of ways. I share what our calendar was back then. I share about the different life stages of a Lyran, just to kind of help when I talk about it in the story, you get kind of an idea of what that is about. But then I also share practices that we did as Lyrans and modern day kind of ways of honoring those practices.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So different meditations and things that we can do, different, just practices in general that resonate with that Lyran energy.
Yeah.
Bring that in. I even have a bit of a songbook with a few songs that came to me from then with, sorry, I'm going to, as I'm going through, there was a lot of beautiful ceremonies, rites, so many different practices that were done. We talk about doing meditation and we talk about having these spiritual practices. The depth of resonance that comes in when I talk about the practices as a Lyran, that connection that we have to source, to the stars, to one another. For all of my spiritual practices, I have not felt that connectedness as much as I have in talking about those experiences. And so I do share some of them and ways that we can practice them today.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, and so an important thing that we discovered the other day when I was on your and Tanis's show, I mean, so you and Tanis, you had important roles for each other.
Yes.
In this life. And she was not Lyran, she was Pleiadian.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to go into that at all about what your ultimate role was?
Yeah, we, and I say to her all the time, I feel so blessed, and she does the same. And we were, at the beginning of it, we were best friends, and our families worked together. When my planet was destroyed, she became my home. Right. So when we talk about that depth of connection, she was my saving grace during that time period. And so I do talk about that connection, and I talk about, the experiences that we had both before and after, and how she was able to help me through all of that. Before the war, the whole kind of system of governance was very, very different, right? Everything was based on community and synergy and holding space for one another and having that ability to make decisions as a whole. Because of the war and the need for military and the need for all of that, things shifted. And so our roles shifted quite drastically during that time. And with so many of the Lyran planets destroyed, there wasn't very many of us left, and we were scattered all over. And so my role became multifaceted. I had to not only hold space to continue the Lyran traditions, and I also had to work for helping the rest of the planets be evacuated. I had to help in military procedures and things like that, that as a Lyran, I would have never had to even think about, let alone make decisions for. And so the shift that happened during that time period, when I reflect on it and as I write about it, one of the profound things that comes up for me is, how I'm trying to, I don't want to give everything away, but at the same time, I do want to share.
Well, I mean, we don't have enough time for you to do the entire
No,
story.
for sure.
Yeah, you're such a good so.
I talk about this a bit in the book, but during that time period, we were what would be the equivalent of teenagers today, right? So we were still in that phase of exploration in our lives. But because of what was happening, many of us were moved into the next phase of our lives. And it's different here. It's not like you just go through this little rite of passage and then all of a sudden you're shifted. The entire time of exploration in our lives was meant to bring us into that place of being able to take on responsibility and to become leaders and mentors and spiritual guides. And we talk about downloads today, right? The downloads that happened during that time, because it wasn't just, okay, here's a bunch of teenagers now that are pushed into this role. We had to get that insight and that knowledge to be able to move into that, but we didn't have the time to be able to really allow that to integrate into our systems, right? And so when I talk about, the space that we held for one another, a lot of it was that processing, right? How do we integrate all of this that we're not ready for in order to be able to move into who we're meant to be during this time?
Okay. And so part of this, of you and Tana stepping into leadership, you as a Lyran, she is a Pleiadian, and you guys were instrumental in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what was interesting is that when the three of us were having the conversation and I was talking about being Arcturian, and you were like, "Are you a healer?"
I knew this energy felt familiar.
And so we were all there at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Me as an Arcturian, you Lyran, she Pleiadian. And we were all playing our roles at this critical time in, we'll call it galactic history, even though it's parallel, right? And so for me, just because I haven't had time to really delve into tapping into what my story with that is, but I can't wait to explore that.
Yeah.
And you guys had profound insight for me as to what the important piece of that was. And so anyway, so it's going to unfold over time, and we'll have a lot more to share.
Yeah. It was such a beautiful moment when we were all talking about it, for many reasons. And one, and you'll read it when you get there in the book. But I'm sharing our story and all, but I do share other stories as well throughout that have come that play a crucial role in what happened. And so one of those stories is actually about a commander who went through a really, really difficult experience, childhood, all of that. And through that story, I was introduced to you. And so it was, when we were talking about it and you were sharing about, your time, it was just so clear that this connection was there, and that you had a very, very significant role to play. And I don't know how you feel about me sharing that role.
No, I'm good. Like, I'm an open book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have to read the entirety of the story in the book, but basically, Lisa, you played the role in terms of, okay, it's a heavy story. There was a prisoner of war who was saved, and her baby were going to die, and you saved them, and that. God, how do I share this without sharing the story? You know what? We'll share it, bits of it.
Yeah.
So, as we know, right, this war was with the Draconians and several others that were on forces with them, but not all Draconians wanted to be in the war, and not all of them wanted to be a part of what was happening. And there were 3 in particular in this story who had been wanting to find a way out, but didn't know how or what to do. And they had actually heard of you as somebody who is open and supporting and accepting if they ever wanted to get out. Right? The feeling that comes is like the underground, right? Like that kind of, this is our way to get out. And so when they came across this one woman and her baby who she was pregnant with at the time, they said, okay, this is it. We're going to take her to this healer, and she's going to accept us. She's going to help them, and maybe this will be our way out. And so just the very fact that they knew they could come to you and not be turned away was a huge turning point for the entire galactic war. Because from that, this baby was able to be born. These Draconians were able to find a home away from the war. And as this baby grew, he, along with these Draconians, were able to actually bring vital information about the war to us so that we could save entire planets before they were destroyed. Right? So when we talk about, an act of kindness, this act of kindness of being open to anybody who needed help saved billions of lives. So I am forever grateful to be able here to be able to say thank you for that.
Oh, and when you were sharing some of that, I was feeling it in my body. And that's one of the things, we bring forth things from these other lives. And my entire life as this Earth Lisa have been a champion of the underdog, and diversity, other cultures, even the biodiversity of animals on the planet, and just loving everything. And so I just, knowing some of that, it's just made my life richer too. So, yeah. And, obviously I'm not perfect in this life. No one is, but
none of us are.
No, but I try to walk my talk, just like you guys do.
Yeah.
So for you, what has knowing this about yourself done for you in this life as Jennifer?
So much. On one level, I think I know to the core of me that everything happens for a reason. And I very much embrace open curiosity. Right? I want to explore, I want to understand, I want to be able to see things in a multitude of ways and know that what my mind does or perceives is only one possibility of what there is. And being able to, and it's interesting because that has been, in my practice with clients and all, that has been kind of an underlying theme of what I work with, is that openness and that ability to be curious.
Mhm.
And when this all came through, I was like, this is it. This is where this comes from, right? That place of knowing that there is so much more, right? And
Mhm.
this experience is just one experience.
Yeah, one of many.
Many.
Yeah. So do you have, I mean, because you've said you've tapped into other lives. So do you have lives that you've tapped into, other galactic kind of lives?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. Not to the extent of this one, in terms of, we talk about. It's funny. I was on another show, and I was asked, like, can you see it, from start to finish? Like, can you see the whole life? And very much like this life, I don't have memories of every moment of this life.
Right.
Right? But we do have kind of the, specifics that show up for us. And I think that the Lyran life is the one that has come through the clearest.
Mhm.
But I do have memories of lives on Lyran prior to that. I also have memories of a life as a draconian,
Mm.
right? And I think that there's a big piece there where, we talk about being able to see both sides and being
Yeah.
able to really understand. And I feel very blessed to have had that life as well,
Mhm.
even in light of the hardship that this Lyran life has brought. And I do mention that in the book only in terms of understanding that everybody has a role to play, right? And that is okay.
Right.
But I don't talk about, the other life in there. I remember a life as a Syrian. And I remember a life, it's interesting. I remember a life on Earth, but not being of Earth,
Okay.
right? But I haven't tapped into where I was actually from at
Okay.
that time.
Do you know where on earth you were?
I was traveling.
Okay.
And so I was traveling. It was just, so I remember, being in Atlantis, and I remember being in Egypt. And it's really an interesting thing because of timelines and all of that.
Hmm.
But again, these lifetimes last a lot longer than human lifespans.
Yeah.
And so I remember those quite clearly. And I remember Atlantis um, very differently than people talk about Atlantis, right? I was not on the water. And so it's a very interesting thing to have these memories and then, kind of taking a step back and going, okay, but this isn't what people generally think of as this, but I know this was where I was. So any information that needs to come for that, I say, okay, you guys have to give me that.
Yeah.
And they actually did give me quite a bit of that. So I do talk about Atlantis and um, several other places on Earth in the book.
Okay.
And so I do share what they gave me on that.
So I have a curiosity question about when you were in Egypt then. Of
Mhm.
do you remember what kind of time period it was or what was going on?
So the memory of Egypt when I was not of Earth
Mhm.
was still very early in its development, and going in and working to help build and bringing in the energy around how to use crystals in order to help build Egypt to
Yeah.
what it is. And so that was that particular memory of the time. I do have other memories of lives of being in Egypt and being a human in Egypt as well. But
Okay.
that particular one was still, Egypt was still very, very new.
Okay. Because I have a very clear life that I got to see during the building of the pyramids. And I was not human. I was Syrian. And
Very cool.
I was a genetic engineer. And there were others of us that were on the ground teaching the humans how to use the technology and the sound thought levitation and all of that. But my job was sending the energy down to the humans so that they could basically upgrade their bodies to run more energy and hold the consciousness.
Oh, amazing. We may
So
have been there at the same time as
that's,
well.
that's what I was thinking. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I do talk about a little bit about it in the book, not the lifetime specifically, but just about some of that evolution of Egypt and that time period, and the crystalline energy and the ability to use that to basically displace particles and all of that kind of stuff. I'm a bit of a science geek sometimes, and I let myself go there. Um, but working with them to help them understand the actual power of crystals and what they can do and how they can be used, which allowed for so much of Egypt to be built.
Yeah. um, okay. So let's switch gears just a little bit because I do want to have you talk about how you help your clients, like how you work with your clients. And you're in Canada, so are you able to have non-Canadian clients in your work?
Yeah. So, as a registered psychotherapist, I'm registered in Ontario. And because of the kind of rules and stuff around that, there's only certain provinces that I can work with as a psychotherapist. As a counselor, as a coach, and in the energy healing piece, that can be anybody from anywhere. And so that's kind of how I differentiate my practice. But yeah, how I work with my clients. Um, I meet my clients where they're at. So whatever it is that they want to work on, whether it is actually working through an issue or just working on uncovering who they really are, right? We will go into or use whatever tools resonate for them. So from a kind of clinical side of things, I'm very person centered in that I don't claim to know anything about anybody's life. I do believe that all of my clients are the experts of their lives, that they know their story and that they know what their experiences are. And so my job isn't to fix them or do anything like that. I believe that it is just to help them uncover who they really are so that they can recognize that there's nothing to fix. Right. And so my job is to journey alongside them and hold space for that and to know who they are for them until they come to that understanding themselves.
Beautiful. So what kind of clients come to you? Like what issues would they might be having that they're really attracted to what you do?
Yeah. I mean, I work with clients who have significant trauma. I work with clients who have, anxiety, depression. I've worked with addictions. And, when it comes to the psychotherapy side of things, I will work with all of that. But I think the thing that people come to me specifically for, as opposed to another psychotherapist, is that spiritual component, right? Because I will bring that into my sessions, whatever it is that, resonates for somebody, that's where we're going to meet. Right. And so there is no limit to, I'll only work with the Christian faith, or I'll only work with it, right? Like that is not a part of my practice. My practice is very open to people wherever they are. And that includes, anybody on their spiritual journey. One of the signs I had, and it says, the light worker psychotherapist, right? I very much, have clients who come to me who say, I have these experiences. I remember past lives. I know these things that are happening. Energetically, I can feel this other stuff going on. And I need somebody who's not going to think I'm crazy, right? I want somebody who's going to be able to hold that space for me and help me explore it and understand it. And, I've had clients who have come to me who the medical system has diagnosed with everything under the sun, who have been medicated and been told that they are not going to ever be well, and that they have to just get used to that. They've been hospitalized and everything else. And we do the work of uncovering what's really going on a spiritual level. And they're thriving, right? And it's, when we get to a place where we can honor our truth, and we don't try to hide it anymore, and we don't try to conceal it, and we don't judge it, but we allow it to be a part of our experience, the freedom that comes with that it's just beautiful.
Well, it is. And that's one of the things that I just got through writing about in my new book that'll come out in maybe a couple months. But really, it's about healing those self-judgments. Because, it's all about shifting to fifth dimensional living ultimately. But it's really how we can do that is we need to get over our judgment of ourselves, because then when we release that, then we can get over our judgment of other people and allow. So we get to be who we are. We allow other people to be who they are. Yeah. And then we integrate that polarity. We understand we're all here for these different experiences. Like you said, you have the Lyran lives, and then you also had the Draco life, right? Yeah. And we are here to be it all.
We really are. I love this. I can't wait for your book to come out. I want to read it. But yeah, so much of the work that I do is that piece of non-judgmental, right? Like, how do I allow myself to just have an experience for experience's sake? It's not good. It's not bad. It's not right. It's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's an experience. And am I okay with continuing with this experience or not is really the question.
Yes, beautifully put. And that's over the last 3 years that I have been channeling my Arcturian self, because I realized, okay, I'm just channeling myself from that Arcturian realm. That is exactly what they share. Like, they're, when you are able to pull yourself out and see things from that higher perspective, that love is the basis of everything. We are all connected. We're all here to just experience and feed information back to source.
I love that. You had asked me about, what this Lyran life and really being able to tap into it has done. I'd love to hear more in terms of the Arcturian life.
So, yeah, well, for me, it's in my younger life, I was quite polarized myself. I had very strong opinions. I was very much an activist, again, championing the rights of the underdog, whether it was for women's rights or LGBTQ plus rights or, anything like that. And what they have really given to me is, again, to understand this whole polarity dynamic and being like, okay, that was fine. You needed to be that in your early life, but now you have to hold yourself above that because you have to see it from this higher perspective. And so 3 years ago, they told me I had to completely stay out of anything political. no news, no media, nothing. I had to really create my own environment because really that is how we shift timelines to a timeline we actually want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And so choosing, no matter what our situation is, to be in a state of joy, to follow our passions, to play. I allow myself to play more. I used to be a hardcore A-type perfectionist. I was pretty judgy too. And so now, like, my life has completely shifted because I do have way more allowance. I've gone through really tough situations as Lisa, lessons that I came to learn. And what it's done for me is now from the other side, I have so much compassion and empathy for people in a way that I didn't before I had that experience.
Yeah.
So it's just all been building. And then the other piece is the healing. And so in that Arcturian realm, I am a healer. That is my primary role. And so not only from that realm, what you shared about, what I was able to do, but in this realm, when I bring forth that healing energy to this earth, Lisa, number one, it heals me, it heals my clients, but it's also propagating out into earth, to Mother God, and anyone that comes into the energy. And so it's been, I'll be 52 very soon. And so it's been half a decade or half a millennial, whatever, half a century of figuring all this out. But now I feel like now I'm stepping into a whole new book of my life, not just a chapter, so that I can really help bridge this reality of our galactic family wanting to reconnect, and hopefully doing so within our lifetime. There are, predictions, but 20, 30 years that we'll have full open contact. But really being here to be that galactic ambassador and channeler. And then understanding all the other galactic lives that I've lived and the roles that I've played, so that I really can help bridge this understanding.
Oh, yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah. So last year, after I was used to channeling that Arcturian energy, they had me bring in 12 additional galactic races that I, for sure, had lives in. So I'm pulling in that energy of myself from those realms. So, of course, I'm Lyran, I'm Syrian, I'm Pleiadian, I'm all the things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. I remember going through and doing star markers in our birth charts a while back and going, yep. Okay, there's a lot of Lyran, but there's a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah.
Here. And kind of going, okay, now what? What am I supposed to do with this? And it's interesting, when these new things come in, the mind doesn't always have the ability to understand all of it. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that has come from this is going, that's okay. Right? That's okay. Yeah. I don't need to know. I just am so blessed to be able to experience it and to be able to allow that experience to, as you said, flow outward.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it's really, I grew up in a spiritual school of enlightenment where I was learning that I am really more than just this earth life and all of that. But having these memories, these experiences has really allowed me to integrate it and embody that multidimensional side of myself.
Beautiful.
So that, like, I don't have any fear of death. A lot of people fear death. I've got no fear of death whatsoever. I have more fear of physical pain in the human body.
I am with you on that.
Yeah. So I already know it's going to be fine when the costume decides to perish. And, in the last year, I've experienced a couple of significant deaths. My husband committed suicide. My mother passed away. And the other part of, like, having this whole understanding of this multidimensional aspect of ourselves really helped me be okay with these passings and not get stuck in the grief and in whatever trauma it might have caused, you know, and so I am so grateful for me choosing to come into this life to experience this and remember and know.
Yeah, it's a different way of navigating tragedy, having a deeper understanding of the connectedness of all things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in our last bit of time here together, because we are running out of time.
Oh my, that went very fast.
Any last words of wisdom or anything that you want to share that we didn't touch on?
What keeps comes back to that connectedness, right? We are all intricately connected in ways that we don't even realize. And so what we hold space for others, we hold space for ourselves. And what we hold space for ourselves, we hold space for others. So really stepping into that understanding, right? Just be mindful of what we're holding space for and what we want in our experience.
Yeah. Beautiful. And how do people find you? Website, socials?
Yeah, I am at www.myholisticself.com or myholisticselfcounseling.com. On Facebook, I think it's Holistic Self Counseling. It's the one that's different. I don't know why. And then on YouTube, you can look up My Holistic Self as well.
Okay. Well, I can't wait for us to have more unfolding of this story. And when your book comes out, I'm going to be like promoting all of that.
I'm looking forward to it coming out. I'm looking forward to seeing what it inspires. Because I think that, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but I think that it is going to spur on other stories from others who have been there. And I just can't wait to see that unfold.
Me too. So definitely a work in progress. And just one last little thing. I think it's always fascinating to me how we come back together in this earth life from these other lives to have a new beautiful expression of whatever we're coming in to do.
Yeah.
And so when Tanis and I first met, we're like, we know each other.
Yeah.
and then the three of us connected and we're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Most definitely. I think we know each other from multiple lives. You think about that and it's the full body.
Yeah.
Confirming it.
Well, it has been a true pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait for further friendship and coming together. So for those of you watching and listening, as always, thank you for your time. And I'll see you next time on Connection to the Cosmos. Aloha.